Are you stuck in the blame game? In this video, I'm going to share with you how to get out of the blame game and become more empowered in your life. Here's a little bit about what I'll be covering in this video. I'm going to start with the causes and the reasons for getting into the blame game in the first place. I'm going to share what the blame game is, some examples of it, where it comes from, how we play it, and then obviously how to get out of it. Let's go. So here's the thing. None of us likes to be wrong. None of us likes to be at fault. You might think that this is pretty obvious, but the fact is this comes from usually the culture that we live in and our childhood. The fact is that making mistakes and messing up are a way that we as human beings learn. Think about little kids when they're learning to walk. They fall, but nobody points a finger at them and says, "You fell, you're a terrible little child, don't ever do that again," right? Nobody blames them for falling. But when it comes to other things in our lives, we get blamed. And so what can happen is that because we don't like to feel the pain and the separation of being blamed, let's say by our mother or a father or a family member when we're a little kid, what happens is when we do something wrong, we start to dissociate from the thing that we did. And because we blame ourselves, right, we start to turn it around and think, okay, well, maybe I can blame something else and then I don't have to feel the pain of being wrong or bad. Does that make sense? So essentially, the blame game is a defense mechanism that we create in order to not feel bad about ourselves. So what we do is, we say, it's not my fault, and we go and we blame something outside of us. And it's normal, especially if we grew up in a household where there was a lot of blame. Chances are we are going to turn that around and start to blame others because we don't want to feel the pain of that separation. The problem with the blame game is that it's disempowering. We get to be innocent of whatever it is, but it also makes us impotent. Because when we put the blame outside of ourselves, that means that we are also placing the power outside of ourselves. When we blame our circumstances or we blame others for the problems in our lives, we end up putting the power into outside of ourselves. We don't have the control. We don't have the power over our own lives. It's disempowering. We get to be innocent, but we are also impotent. If we are never to blame, if we never own the fact that we are the source of our lives, then we're never at cause in our lives. We're always at the effect of circumstances or other people. So ultimately, playing the blame game puts us in a victim role. It can put us into this dynamic where we're the victim and someone else is the villain, which also sets us up for then somebody else swooping in and being the hero. That's the drama triangle. But essentially, when we play the blame game, we put ourselves in the victim role and somebody else has to be the villain. This is the culture that we live in. The media loves the blame game. Think about it, right? It's part of our cultural heritage, right? Our movies are victim, hero, villain. Our media, victim, hero, villain. It's very easy to organize the world in this way, but it's also very disempowering, right? Somebody's always playing a role that doesn't give them the creative ability to create their lives, right? And so the blame game is a very easy way to kind of get stuck in these roles and always feel very righteous, right? When you're blaming someone else, then you're not at fault. Like, I'm good. It's your fault. It's your problem. You did this to me, right? It always sets us up for a very disempowered thing because being the hero will always end up somehow the victim. The villain always ends up the victim. It's a constant, we switch these roles constantly and it takes away our power. And the reason we switch the roles is because, think about it, right? When we blame somebody else and we get angry at them, often we become the villain because we start attacking, right? Then they become the victim, right? Or the hero. Let's say the hero comes in and isn't good enough and swoops in and tries to save the day, but isn't able to do it. Well, now they're the villain. You messed this up. And now when we're pointing fingers at them, they become the victim again. So the thing about this model of the blame game is that everybody loses eventually. Let's do a quick example of the blame game. Right? Everybody knows somebody like this. Maybe you had an employee like this or even a boss who was always late. for work. And they would come in and be like, oh, today this happened. The traffic was really bad, or I spilled coffee, or McDonald's gave me a coffee that was too hot and I spilled it all over myself, or whatever it is. But there's always an excuse. There's always a reason. Now, the thing about it is they always have an excuse and always have a reason, right? It's never their fault. So they're not empowered around being on time. And you can't trust them to be on time. So it creates a disconnect. It creates a breakdown in the relationship. You can't trust them. They can't trust themselves. They're never at fault. They're always at the victim of circumstances. So ultimately, this person is not going to really get ahead too much in life, most likely. They're probably going to have challenges and struggles because they're not reliable again and again. So what's the solution to breaking that cycle is for the person to say, enough of this. I'm not going to do this anymore. Take my power back around time. I'm going to get up earlier. I'm going to leave my house earlier. I'm going to set an alarm. I'm going to take these actions. And that's one of the best things that you can do to bust out of the blame game is to take responsibility and to take your power back and to say, I am the creator of my experience. I am the creator of my life. If I want a different outcome, I have to take different actions. Now, one last thing before I share with you how to get out of the blame game. And even before I do that, I want to invite you to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit the little alert button so that you'll know the next time I drop a video. So one last thing before I get into how to get out of the blame game. You can also get into a blame game with yourself, where you make yourself both the victim and the villain. Now, this is kind of a little bit mind-blowing. You might think the solution is to blame yourself. Now, what blaming yourself might look like in that example I gave earlier is if your boss or that person that's always late said, I'm such a terrible person. I'm never on time. I'm horrible. I'm so bad, right? They point the finger at themselves, but that's not empowering yet. What's empowering is when they say, enough of this. I take my power back. I'm not going to do this anymore. So you want to also notice the subtle difference between like self-flagellation and blaming yourself. It's just the same dynamic as blaming others. You're making yourself the victim and you're being the villain, the person that's attacking yourself at the same time. So that doesn't work either. So the key to getting out of the blame game is to take full responsibility for everything. Now that sounds radical, and in practice it might be really challenging because there are times when you get stuck in traffic, and there are times when things go sideways and you have no control over them. But what I invite you to is more of an intellectual exercise, right, than anything. What would it look like if you took 100% responsibility 100% of the time, no matter what happens? And not from a place of that self-flagellating blame, but from the place of, if I had to do it all over again, how could I do this differently? How could I do this better? And turning it into an opportunity to take different actions in the future. When you use this idea of taking 100% responsibility 100% of the time, it gives you a lot of empowerment. It gives you the sense of, I control my life. I am in charge of me. And it also creates that sense of empowerment in the face of crazy circumstances, kind of like the ones we're experiencing in the world today. So I'll give you an example of this. COVID, right? 2020 hits. All of a sudden, the world shuts down. My clients are freaking out. We have no control over what's going on. Like, we can pretend to, but ultimately, we're not locking things down. Our governments are, right? What I did, how I led my crew and my clients through this experience was, what would it look like to take full responsibility over ourselves and our businesses in the face of this? And we had a really deep and beautiful conversation about what it would look like if the work that we're doing is more important now than ever. How would they finish the sentence? Now more than ever, right? Why is what I do more important now than ever? Forget about COVID, or even to some degree, and I know this sounds weird, even to some degree embracing COVID, all right? Let's say we embrace this circumstance, and in the face of this circumstance, I'm still going to take 100% responsibility 100% of the time for how my business goes. What would that look like? Well, every single person came up with something like, oh, I could do this. I could do that. I could give away my course for free and get more people into it and then have an opportunity to sell them something later. Or I could do this and I could use this as marketing, or I could give away this thing. Whatever it was, every single person was able to come up with an empowered way to take full responsibility instead of focusing their energy on, well, COVID happened, so, sorry, like everything fell apart. Now, and I'm not saying that anybody who did have a struggle during COVID was bad or wrong. All I'm saying is that shift in mentality made a really big difference for me and for my clients, and perhaps could make a really big difference for you too. And one more thing that's really important in taking responsibility, it's about coming into the present. A lot of times the blame game is played in the past or even in the future. In the past, it's here's what happened to me. These are the circumstances that prevented me from XYZ. Or in the future, I can't because this circumstance is not present. Really, when we get out of the blame game, part of it is coming into present moment. In this moment, here's what I'm creating. In this moment, here's an action I can take. In this moment, here's what I can change. And so coming into presence is a really big part of getting out of the blame game. I hope this video was helpful for you and will help you get out of the blame game. If you want to go even deeper into this topic, I have some videos about the drama triangle, which is really, really powerful. You can check out those videos in my playlist below in the notes. I hope you enjoy it.